In this video, we want to look at a Python Flask app that uses a layout and some style. So we're going to have the Flask app is going to have different routes and HTML pages associated with those different routes, but they're going to sort of share a layout, sort of some common HTML structure and some common style. Okay, so that's what we're doing. And then the shared stuff, we will have some HTML that will have just be HTML, but also some HTML in which we can insert things here and there, and that's going to be handled with Jinja. Okay, so let's get started. We have, in my Visual Studio is opened up to the folder in which contains my virtual environment, but I'm not yet in my virtual environment. I tend to work very sort of terminal command line approach. So I'm going to, down there in the terminal, cd venv, move into my virtual environment, and then enter the command. For me and a Windows machine, it's in the scripts folder. And then it is activate, and that is a PowerShell command here. And let me make it a little bit bigger here. Okay, so now with this green, I can see that I've activated. And then I'm doing a very sort of, this is a Windows, but also a very PowerShell approach. So I'm going to, I have a bunch of apps in here. I'm going to use a PowerShell command to say, here's the one I want, Flask extend layout. That's what we're doing. We're extending a layout. This command here allows for some debugging. So if I want to change something on the page, that will allow it. There's a different way. I'm doing a very command line approach, so that's the command line way to do it. There's a different way if you're running your programs differently. And then finally, we'll do Flask run. We'll look at it and then say, how did we get here? Okay, so here is the URL, and I have some pretty hideous styling, but also some very obvious styling. Okay, so here's the default route, and I have, taking a peek ahead, another route that is sort of leads to the same stuff, and that's called first. So if I come here and move to the first route, it's the same thing. It's not a redirect, it's just two routes leading to the same file. We still haven't hit redirect. And then if there's any justice in the world, the second route should be called second. It is, okay. And I'm in Edge for this. And there's second. And this says it's number 2 up here, and the title is different. And up here it's saying, in the common stuff, it's saying this header is shared by all pages. Down here, it's saying this footer shared by all pages, but in between, I say down here that there is some data. This is the second of all hard-coded, and it says movie star and Ginger. So that is the sort of new information. So the new information that makes one page different from the others is pretty small in this example, but because I'm emphasizing the common stuff, the sort of shared layout. So, but let me go back to first, and here we see the title's different, the first one, and down here we have, so we're passing some information. So this information is displayed Fred Dancer in the first, and the title is different, the first one, and then this one has a title of number 2, and the information passed is movie star and Ginger. Okay, so let's see how we got that. We imported Flask, render template, and URL for. So this is the new one here. And we're starting up a Flask app. we established a default route and the route called first, and they are lead to the same place. They are handled by this method hello world, and we are using render template. So we're going in our templates folder. There is an HTML file called first, and we are sending it two pieces of information, pass one and title. And then pass one happens to be a dictionary with two properties, a name and an occupation. And so we are sending it to a different HTML file, and we're sending it some information. And we've done that before, except when we look at the HTML is going to refer itself to a common layout. So this part, the Flask part, looks the same. It's going to be the HTML's part that's going to look different. Because we've seen this before. We've seen the file using render template. We've seen information pass. So the sort of shared styling and shared layout will be seen only when we get over to first and second. So the route called second goes to second HTML, and I'm passing it different information in the dictionary pass to and different information in title. And I don't have to name, I named title the same, but I named this differently. I can give it the same name, I can give it a different name. The HTML has to know this name. So first will refer to pass one and second will refer to pass two, or I could have named them the same as I did here with the title. And then if you're running your programs differently than I am, then there's a game down here you can play to allow debugging. But for me, debugging came from the command line. All right, now we need to look at let's look at first. And the first thing we see at the top of first is that it's not starting, it's got some HTML down here in, say, an H1, but it doesn't start off with pure HTML, with an HTML tag, but with a Jinja reference to some HTML. It says then it's going to extend, this file extends layout.html. So let's take a peek over at layout.html, and these are all the HTML files are in the templates. So first and second and layout will all be in templates. So here's layout, and this looks more like regular HTML. There's the doc type, here's the HTML tag, it should have the closing HTML tag, the head tag, the body tag. So this looks like from the start more like HTML than did first HTML, but there's got to be points in here where this is not a page, a complete page, a static page, but it's a page that the other pages are going to use. We never in Flask, in Python, we never said we're referring to layout. It's only first that referred to layout. Here's one place here. Here's a place title where there is some Jinja. So here in the title tag, we have some Jinja, the curly and the percent, and we're doing what's called a block. And so there's a block and an end block. So where does it begin? Where does it end? So this sort of describes a Jinja container where we will put things, and we're going to put things related to title. Okay, and so then title was one of the things we passed. And now still here in the head, so that was in the head. And then here still in the head, there is a link to a style sheet, and that style sheet is in the static. So we're using the URL for it to figure out where static was. So in In a previous video, we read a file and we were doing it, reading that file more of a Python way than a Flask way. But here is a Flask way to refer to a file. So we're saying we'll find out, and it's more webby, more, it's not referring to the system of the computer that you're on, but more uh, more that is saying that it's a web thing. So it's looking for the URL for static, which was a folder, and then it's going to look in there for the common CSS. So here's the static folder, here's the common CSS. So that will give us our styling. So this page links to this styling. And then we'll take a peek at that in a minute. And this, again, we're still on the layout. And then it's going to say up here in what I've labeled the header with the semantic tag header. I also gave it the class of header. So I'll do some styling based on the class of header. But this is the stuff that's always the same. I don't have much that I really want to be the same here. So I just gave a message that if you change the style tends to get cached. And so if you've made a change in the style and you want to see this change in the style beyond just sort of saving some change to the CSS, you've got to know how to sort of get the cache to be refreshed. And that is, at least in the browsers I'm using, Control-Shift-R. Okay, so, but this is the common stuff. So this is the stuff you'll see on both pages, first and second. They're both using the layout, so you'll see this on both of them. And then here's the part that can change this little block. So here's a block, and I call that block stuff. So that just is a place. So here these names are just a name, just a place on the page, on the layout page where you can put things. So, and then here is a footer. So this footer is shared by all pages, so you will see it. I put, even though it's a footer, I gave it the class of header, so they will be styled the same. So that is the layout. So first and second will both use the same layout and also the same CSS. So back to first. So we said here that we extended the layout. So that means we're using that layout that we just looked at. Then it says here that within where you see the block in layout, where you see the block title, here it was. So we had a block on the layout that we called title. Give us the curly title, which was one of the pieces of information passed over from the Flask. So here in the Flask, there is a piece of information called title. So over here, that title has to match, the curly title here has to match what was passed from the Python file, from the py file. But this title here in the block in the Jinja, that has to match what was here in the layout. So one of those words, the block title, that has to match the Jinja, which is in the layout. And here the curly title has to match what came from Python as past data. And it was named, it was sort of a key value pair, and the key was title. And this stuff is just getting inserted. So this says, here's what I insert into, and here's one thing I want you to insert in the container called title, insert the title, and in the container called stuff. So here's the beginning of stuff, and here's the end of stuff. And I only have to say in first what's different from layout. All the shared stuff is in layout. So I'm saying here the new stuff, first things first. So that is just sort of hard-coded information in first, and then I'm using here pass1 name. So I named the data that I passed over pass1, and it was a dictionary, so it had a name property and it had an occupation property. So I'm telling what HTML structure I want, but also what Jinja data I want, or what data I want Jinja to insert and where I want it inserted. So that was first. Second, of course, looks similar, but just the data is different. So here, again, in second, we say we're extending the layout. We say there was a container called title, and what I want in title is the title that was passed as information. And then here's the block stuff, and I'm just giving it a very similar layout, but I don't have to. I can give it a completely different layout, but just a simple in and out example. So that was first and second using layout, and then we should just have a peek at the CSS, but the CSS is just CSS, so it was called by the layout. The layout is doing this URL looking in static for the common CSS, but the common CSS is just CSS. It doesn't have any reference back to anything. So it's just saying here's a body styling. Here's me styling a class called header. And then here is a styling of a paragraph within the header. But that's just sort of simple standard CSS, and no Jinja over here, nothing fancy over here. So I think that's what I wanted to show you. So the Python didn't look much, the Flask didn't look much different than it had before, but the files that we're sending it to are working within a layout. So this is more about Jinja than Flask, I would say, and how to use, give all the common structure into one file, and then how to work with the data passed from the Python and insert it, and to make two different pages, first and second, but those having a common layout and a common style. That's what I wanted to show you in this one. Thanks for your attention.